In this video, I'm going to explain how Bryan Johnson went from uncontrollably stuffing his face at night to allegedly becoming the healthiest person on the planet, and how you can use the same principles to change your habits without spending millions of dollars like Bryan, or even spending any money at all. And these principles apply not only to Bryan's past unhealthy eating, but any addictive habit that you might have or be trying to change, such as reducing screen time or your goal of becoming more productive. Principle number 1. Bryan changed his environment, both physical and social. Bryan explains the secret to his behavior change by sharing the story from Homer's Odyssey, where Odysseus and his crew at sea need to pass these tempting sirens. Odysseus has his crew tie him to the mast of the ship so that he can't be lured by the siren song and go overboard. In this metaphor, Bryan is Odysseus, and the siren song is his unhealthy eating. And whatever your self-destructive behavior is the siren song. It's whatever's tempting you, which you know is bad for you in the long run. Being tied to the mast represents setting up your life or your environment in a way so that you have no choice but to not engage in that self-destructive behavior. So how did Bryan change his environment? Well, he removed himself from his old environment where he had easy access to sweets, cookies, brownies at night that were tempting him, into a new environment where there was no unhealthy food in the home. Now, I'm not telling you to go and leave your family, not that Bryan wanted to leave his family, but the principle here is to make it as hard as possible to engage in your self-destructive behavior, hence being tied to the mast. So how do you do this? Well, if possible, you just completely get rid of your access to your self-destructive behavior, but many times this isn't possible. For example, if you're trying to reduce your social media use, you could just chuck your phone out the window, but you probably want to use your phone for other productive things. And so in these cases, what we can do is we can create barriers between us and our self-destructive behaviors, making it at least harder to do those things. So with the social media example, you can delete apps, you can download certain apps to restrict your use of other apps. And there's many other more examples. And the idea here is to remove as much thought from the process as possible so that you don't have to rely on willpower. And you can just easily sort of detox from those behaviors. Principle number 2, buffer stress. Bryan has multiple specific protocols to buffer against stress and to improve his mental health. Because even though Bryan has removed unhealthy food from his home, if he really wanted to, he could go to the store and buy a donut. He could DoorDash some crumble cookies. I don't think he'd do that because he has a lot of other factors at play, but this is a possibility for us. We could pass through all the barriers we've created and get to our self-destructive behavior if we're really stressed and tempted. And so this is where it's important to cope with that stress in healthy ways and to do these things that Bryan does, which I will highlight 3 of them. Number 1, Bryan prioritizes sleep, or Bryan really is obsessed with sleep, and for good reason, because sleep is essential for all aspects of health, but specifically in this context, emotional and mental health. Reduces our stress, allows us to process parts of the day so that we're not so emotional and vulnerable to the temptations of instant gratification. Number 2, exercise. Bryan does strength training, cardio, and high intensity training. And all of these create feel-good chemicals in our brain and body that lower our stress and reduce the chances of us turning to instant gratification. And it's kind of counterintuitive, but putting our body under temporary stress through things like exercise, cold exposure, or certain breathing techniques reduces our stress on a long-term basis. And you don't need to exercise for a long time even, or go to a gym, or have a fancy home gym like Bryan. You could just do simple calisthenics, body weight exercises where you are right now. Or you could even just go for a short sprint, even 1 minute, and just see what difference that makes. Number 3, meditation. Bryan meditates formally and informally. Formally through a specific cognitive exercise that he does each day, and informally during quiet moments in the morning and evening each day. And meditation and mindfulness really allows our mind time to process things so that we can kind of deal with stress instead of turning to temporary solutions like food or social media, technology, substances, pornography, whatever. And if we don't give our mind this time to really process things, then we can find ourselves stressed and not really know why. And if you want to learn more details about mindfulness and meditation, I made a short guide that you can check out in the description of this video. Principle number 3, accountability. Bryan hired a team of people to help him in his health journey and reaching his goals. And this was probably the cherry on top for helping him reach his goals, but this will definitely help the average person, you and me, to reach our goals. And you don't need to hire anybody to keep you accountable. You can start, and there's multiple levels to this, but you can start with self-accountability, which Bryan also does. And he describes it like this. Bryan is not just Bryan right now, but there's morning Bryan, evening Bryan, there's Bryan in 20 years. And he realized that evening Bryan doesn't have the other Bryan's best interests in mind. And so he does what his future Bryan wants, which has the best interest of all the other Bryans in mind. And so we can all do this by being accountable to ourselves, thinking about what our future self wants us to do right now. Kind of the next step would be having an accountability partner, which is also free. You can get a friend, family member, or even someone from a subreddit to keep you accountable to your goals, simply sharing your goals and having them follow up with you on whether you did or did not do them. And I have a little trick that makes accountability far more effective than how it's usually done, and this is by adding some sort of reinforcement. And this is basically rewarding yourself for completing your goals for the day, week, month, or year. And this is highly personal. It could be anything from a certain food that you like to an activity that you don't normally do, something that you would let yourself buy if you reached your goals. All depends on what you like. And the idea is that your accountability partner would make sure that you reward yourself if you complete the goal you said you would, or don't reward yourself if you don't. And this will add that extra motivation. And now these principles, you don't have to use all of them forever, or maybe you only need a few of them to start seeing progress. But as you implement them, you won't have to do them as much because you go through this sort of detox period where your cravings of your self-destructive behavior will reduce. You may not need that accountability partner anymore. All of us have the ability to become as healthy and disciplined as Bryan Johnson. And there are many principles that Bryan doesn't use, or at least hasn't talked about. And some of these I'll continue to share and post about on this channel. So subscribe if you want to see those videos in the future.